Taylor Jackson.
Shooting 67 weddings last year.
Taylor Jackson, welcome.
So Taylor, you are well known in this community. You're an amazing photographer.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I hope that you do find it truly helpful. I do my best to answer any questions in the comments, especially the first few days after video being up. So comment down below if you have any questions. It's also pricing month over on Patreon. So if you are a wedding photographer and you're interested in making this a full-time career and shoot 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 weddings a year, whatever your goal is, head over to Patreon. There are already hundreds of videos up there, but this month specifically is all focused on pricing. One of my big struggles when I was first getting started was that I would get an inquiry and I would send out an email and I would never hear back from those people and they would ghost. And it's such a struggle and you have no control over it and all you want to do is shoot that wedding, but they're not getting back to you. So I'm going to walk you through my process and how I flip from having probably 80-90% of my couples ghosting to actually getting back to me and responding. So join me over on Patreon if you're interested in making this a full-time career. On to today's video. This is for sure number one getting ready mirror that I've ever seen. That's so good. Hey everyone, welcome to the wedding day. This is a bit of a non-traditional wedding and I love it. Non-traditional element one is that there's a car parked in the reception. It's a Plymouth. There are also an overwhelming number of details here, so I spent a lot of time, a lot more time than I usually would to make sure that I capture every single individual element because this was kind of a tool shed, barn style thing, housed some tractors, and now it's a wedding venue, so they brought every single element in intentionally. And I feel like everything has a story and it's important to almost empathize with your couple, and they might not have said like, hey, details are super important to us, but when they put that much effort into it, I know that it's something that's important to capture. They told me about this car. This car is very important, so I took a lot of photos of this car. I felt that it should just be documented. I had an extra 10 minutes. I went around, I shot some just kind of interiors of the car. I kind of like these photos a lot. If you've ever seen the Flume mixtape, I recommend you check it out. It's not this car, but it's kind of similar, and it reminded me of that, so I don't know, that's where I took my inspiration from. It's a very hot day, and this is the only air-conditioned room, so the guys hung out here for as long as possible. Now moving into the first look.
Yep, whenever you're ready.
Just want to give a quick shout out here to Elisa's dress. It's amazing. It's a non-traditional wedding dress, and I had no idea. I didn't know what I was getting myself into at all today, and I showed up and I was just absolutely blown away by the amount of effort they put into it, as well as that they really did just make the wedding their own, which I do really appreciate. Kind of trying to focus on the house a little bit and some other features and kind of pull that all together. It kind of worked out. Now we have a little bit more space to kind of work with here. So this is Chris waiting for the first look here. And I think he also has no idea what her dress and what her floral is. And I'll give you a quick photo of the floral in a second here. And it's really kind of off the charts amazing. And this is not her floral. This is Chris, his reaction. And then I don't even know if it's considered floral. It's plants. So it's leafy goodness and jungalo-ness, but not necessarily floral, I guess, overall. And get a little closer together if you can. That's good. And if you guys want to look at each other and just be really happy with each other. Awesome. And if you're interested in more about my posing system and structure and how I do it, there's actually on Patreon, it's called The Introvert's Guide to Wedding Photography Posing, and it's a full breakdown of my process. I'm traditionally pretty quiet and shy, and I don't really like to interact too much on the wedding day, and it was my thought process for a long time that I really did just want my couples to kind of just be themselves, but unfortunately, you kind of have to coach them and put them in a place where they're able to be themselves, and The Introvert's Guide to Wedding Photography is kind of the things that I figured out to take great photos and to get great images and not have to be that extroverted out of the world personality that I'm just not naturally. You'll notice that a lot of these images, I've processed them a little bit different. All of these use my presets that, again, are available on Patreon, or you can buy them straight out if you want. But hot sun, 12 noon, right now it's shady, it's okay. But some of the shots, I have to kind of fade the tones a little bit more than I usually would just to kind of account for that. All right, and just have a look at me and just be somewhat happy with my existence over here. Thank you very much. Family formals and wedding party, we just kind of did them all here. It was a good enough space. It's a pretty hot background as far as just the amount of sun on it, but I knew that the dynamic range of my camera could handle it no problem. I also set my camera to D-lighting high, which is a Nikon thing. I'm sure there's other variations depending on what camera system you're shooting, but it only affects the JPEG, but it makes the JPEG look exactly like the RAW file that I want to edit to. And when you're shooting in non-ideal conditions, it really does kind of help pull things back together. De-lighting or dynamic range or whatever it might be called in your camera, essentially what it does is it saves a little bit of the highlights, so it doesn't let the highlights go too far on a JPEG, and it will save you a little bit that way. And then it also bumps the shadows up a little bit to make a higher dynamic range image, but still feel natural. I think it's important to just shoot as good as you can in camera to make sure that your post-production time stays as low as it possibly can, because wedding day, you're shooting a lot of volume. And one thing that I specifically screwed up this wedding day is I shot everything on cloud white balance rather than shade the house with a little shade symbol like I usually do. And in this specific instance, cloud mode really just didn't give me the tones that I wanted, and it wasn't exactly right out of camera. But if I would have been on house mode, which is what I eventually edited everything to, I just would have had everything pretty much ready to go straight out of camera. Super fortunate that the clouds rolled in and just covered kind of this area quickly, because if it didn't, they would have been staring directly into the sun, and none of these images really would have been that great. If that would have been the case, what I would have done is I would have waited for people to get a lot closer, because the house would have created at least a little bit of shade, and probably by about maybe this point, they would have been in a spot that I was able to actually get them in the shade again. So it's all just working with whatever variables you're given on the wedding day. And one variable that I couldn't control is the car that parked out in the middle of the road that's in the background of every single shot that I have to Photoshop out now. It was a guest of the wedding, and they decided to park there rather than coming in. So they're in all the photos, but that's all right. It's a funny thing maybe. And you can see Montana over there. She's my second photographer for the day. Also getting frames. Everything you're seeing today is just from my camera specifically. I feel like it's important for me to show these linear timelines and also just include the stuff that I've shot. Otherwise it becomes a little too confusing to, I guess, like digest as a single person shooter. And I chose to take a far walk back and zoom in to 90 to get this shot so that everything is a little more compressed and the car is a little bit closer to the people, that's a little bit closer to the couple. If I just would have shot the car with a 35, it would have been super wide and everyone else would have been like tiny in the background and it would have been totally focused on the car. But because I was at 90, things compressed together a little bit better. That happened a long time ago. Now we've seen other photos and we've done other things since then. One of the things that I'm focused on is being as far away from them as I kind of can, because if I'm shooting at 24 or 35 and I'm right at their feet, they're going to look very, very tall because they're up a couple of steps. So I'm doing my best to kind of zoom in, and at least that way I control a little bit of the distortion. For them walking down the aisle, I go back to my 35. I thought it was a nice scene. I feel like this time of the scene, everybody's nice and happy, because it only really takes like one person looking at the camera and not clapping to kind of ruin a photo. So I always err on the side of being a little bit more focused on my subject. And in those instances, when I know things are going to be exciting and everybody's going to be happy, I'm happy to go wide. I'm spending a lot of time on my 35 1.4 today. I really love the look of a 35 or even a 24 when shot at 1.4. If you're shooting a DSLR, make sure that you micro calibrate or autofocus calibrate all of your lenses so they're actually as good as they can be. Nikon wise, if I'm using a Nikon lens on a Nikon camera body, usually it's pretty close, but if I put a Sigma lens on it, it usually takes some time and effort, like up to an hour in some cases, with the Sigma dock to actually make sure that it's as good as the lens can be. There's actually a video, an AF fine-tuned video on my channel somewhere if that interests you at all, or if this is maybe the first you're hearing of it, because it really is something that's very important. Now I'm just picking up some shots, kind of telling the story. Again, the details of the day are so important to the couple. I want to make sure that I capture everything, as well as all the regular normal stuff that I would typically get on to golden hour. So there are some options for photos. So I could have the couple out here, and as long as they are kind of even 3 feet in there, I can kind of frame it off so that it looks like they're just out in the middle of a field. But I think the actual good shot is over here where there's tracks and kind of human-made pathways out into the forest there. I think that is going to be the shot. Good leading lines, exit lines, lines all around. Let's go take some golden hour sunset photos. The light is low enough that it is totally fine to kind of side light them as I'm doing. Also, a little bit of cloud came in, so I wasn't able to kind of get that perfect sun. If I did have that perfect sun at a very low angle, I would be shooting a lot more directly into the sun. But with that cloud cover, it kind of allows me to do whatever I want while maintaining kind of that golden element of all of the light of the wedding day. You'll see that I'm kind of letting the sky go a little bit, that I could bring that back. I could make it all blue. I can give you kind of a quick example here that there's a few different ways you can process images of this style. One is like this, where it kind of feels, I guess, more true and natural to the scene. And the other is something like this that brings the sky in a little bit more. I find that if I play around too much with dynamic range and really try to bring everything into the photo, it starts looking a little bit too fake and a little bit too altered, so I prefer to keep it simple. All right, off-camera flash section of the day. I have my V1, my Godox or Godox, depending on how you want to pronounce it, inside the car. And I have an Xpro controller up here. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm exposing for the full scene, and then I'm adding more flash power in over my Xpro to kind of balance things out. If you're interested in off-camera flash for wedding photographers, I have a full course, again, up on Patreon. There's a lot of videos that is my thought process for off-camera flash is that I never want to create an artificial scene. I always want it to exist, but I sometimes might just need better light. This is an example of probably the most obvious off-camera flash that I would probably ever use, but I kind of like it. It didn't really work with them not lit up in the car. Here's one of the downfalls with off-camera flash is that I had it set up. I'm like, I'm gonna use that all night. And I tried really hard to make it work in this room, but it turns out that the ambient is just better. And if you're shooting fast primes like this 85 1.4G, that's the shot with flash. And you can see that it's fine, it works, but that's a shot without flash and it works pretty much exactly the same. So in this specific case, I didn't really need flash, but I tried really hard to make it work. Same goes for the first dance, is that I really just didn't need off-camera flash, and I had it all set up and I gave myself the option, but after a few test frames, I realized pretty quickly that ambient is just better. So as you can see, there's a lot of astrology and moons and all kinds of things going on inside the wedding venue. So I took this as an opportunity to also do some star photos. Right now, this is what the stars are looking like. And I use an app called PhotoPills to kind of find where that main core of the galaxy is and what time it's going to be in the exact spot that I want it. I'm using my bag as a tripod, and I'm going to get Chris and Elise to just stand and hold hands for 5 seconds, and they're going to stand and not move. And that's the photo that I took. I processed it to be a little more purple, a little more, I don't know, I felt that artistically this was a better image than doing one that was just like absolutely technically correct. So maybe it's too blue for you, but you can easily dial that back if that's not your taste. So thanks for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed, and jump over to Patreon if you're interested in getting the Wedding Photographer's Pricing Month. We're going to go through absolutely everything when it comes to pricing for wedding photography and wedding photographers. See you there.